Well, hi. It's the top of the hour, which means it's time for Two on One, the internet's number one talk show where two disciples theologians engage another theologian on the pop culture topic of his, her, or their choice. I'm one of your co-hosts, the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
I'm your other co-host, the Reverend Stephanie Kendall, who's trying to, it just closed in the background, but I'm in a new space. So I was like, how do I make this?
At least you remembered to wear something different this week. I think I'm wearing the same shirt I wore last week.
You look good in anything. If we learned anything from last week's episode, it's that who you are and who you are meant to be is fully celebrated and loved.
And happy Christmas in July, Spiff.
Happy Christmas.
Did you get, what would it be? It would be like 12 beach balls, 11 lifeguards, 10
margaritas.
5 lemonades. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. No, it's good. I am still on sabbatical, which is why I am in California. Well, so I will be in California for the entire month of July as we celebrate Christmas in July, which is actually really appropriate because I don't get to spend Christmas with my family. And so I am here with my family. So it's actually kind of like I do this year, which is lovely.
Well, that's good. I hope that you have Epiphany happen as well, which would be in August. Hey, speaking of Christmas, I've been lighting candles in honor of our Christmas, and they're very washed out because of my fluorescent lighting above me. But one of them, there we go, I can sit in front of it, is already lit. And that is the candle for Passion. So do you want to know what this week is?
Yes. What is this week, Arthur?
This week is style.
Ooh, I like it. We're lighting a candle for style?
Well, we're talking about Home Alone today, and it stars the indefatigable Catherine O'Hara.
The patron saint of style.
Remember us, O Moira, grant us boldness. Amen.
And if you want reliable, bold styles, check out the liturgical textiles from Jeff Wunrow Designs.
Jeff Wunrow Designs is celebrating 16 years of making ordinary time extraordinary, crafting exquisite, beautiful, stylish stoles, banners, paraments, frontals, copes, chasubles, and miters.
Ooh, what's your style? Traditional, prismatic, spirit-fed, or protest-led? There's a wide variety of gorgeous products for you to see at jeffwunrow.com, but you can also customize to your specifications.
And speaking of specifications, Spiff, you're so stylish. You have a custom stole, don't you?
I do. It is cut for my height. It is a rainbow pattern because I needed a good rainbow stole. It has a protest fist emblemized. There's a chalice on the nape, and one of my ordination passage verses is sewn into the front.
Wow. Well, surely for all of our listeners, viewers, and deuces, there's a perfect stylish stole or banner or parament or frontal for you and your religious community from Jeff Wunrow Designs as well.
Oh, yes. So deuces, go to jeffwunrow.com, jeffwunrow.com. And for our listeners and viewers, you have your very own promo code 2on1, all one word. You hear us say it every week and we mean it. It is the best deal on the internet. You will get 15% off, not just one stole, but your entire stole order.
And Merry Christmas in July, everybody.
I hope this is what you get yourself for July Christmas.
By the way, fun fact, last week I forgot to stop roasting those chestnuts on an open fire, so now it's a closed fire.
Oh, I'm glad you didn't burn down the church.
Well, that's why I can't be trusted to be at church alone. Speaking of being at church alone, today we're talking about Home Alone with Carrie Tannehill. I'm gonna admit her.
Do it.
Here she is. To talk Home
I love Carrie Tannehill.
Hey, Carrie Tannehill, welcome back to Two on One. We are so glad to see your face again.
I know, I'm so excited to be here again and to discuss this movie, which I have a lot of thoughts about.
Well,
us too.
There's some definite theological questions about this. We were kind of chatting right before the show. So last week we did Love Actually. We talked about it with the Reverend Whitney Waller. And you told us before the show, you love Love Actually, you're a romantic at heart. That's cool. I like that. We're just going to ask all of our guests about the previous movies, I think.
Or at least just Love Actually, because I feel like that's the one we picked that was we picked it because of how polarizing it is. We're like, oh, right. I love it. We talked a little bit about, that it sits on our hearts for lots of different reasons, but also it has not aged well.
No, it has not. And I know it's such a problematic movie, but it's one of those movies I have to watch at Christmas time because I do love it. And I think it's the hopeless romantic in me, or just, you want that happy ending kind of person that I am, which goes against all of my Slytherin ways. But I really do love that movie.
Well, and you brought up the Slytherin thing, and I think Home Alone is like the perfect pick for a Slytherin Christmas movie because, wow, it is excessively violent.
It is. It is. But I actually had that question to you guys. Now, what house do you think Kevin would be sorted in? Do we think he's a Slytherin, or is he a Gryffindor because he's brave?
Oh, that is a big, like he turns to the furnace and he tells it to shut up. Like he learns the power of his courage.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And he stands up to the burglars. So I don't know if he's a true Slytherin.
I think he's a Slytherin. I think you're right. I think he would be sorted into Slytherin, and I think he'd be okay with that. But I think he'd be really good friends with all the Gryffindors.
Yeah, I don't think he would choose to be in Gryffindor, which I think is our litmus test for how one gets into Gryffindor.
Correct.
He would know about.
We all agreed on that last time.
Oh hell yes.
But I think you're right. But I don't think he's Slytherin because, again, to go against the trope of like Slytherin are like evil or anything like that. I think it's his cunning ways. I think he's really, I don't know, he's creative. Slytherins are super creative. And I think that he exercises that in a way that is fun. And I'm with you, but that's a great question.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when I rewatched the movie last night, even though I've seen it easily 100 times. I just had to rewatch it again last night just to make sure I didn't forget anything.
Well, I mean, it's a John Waters script. Not John Waters. It's John Waters. It's a John Waters script. It's directed by Christopher Columbus. And doesn't John Williams do the score?
Yes.
Like
it got nominated for an Oscar. Yeah. Home Alone got nominated for an Oscar, like an actual Academy Award, for the score, because first of all, take the movie away, just give me the score and I've got Christmas.
Yeah.
Like I own it on vinyl because I play it like during Christmas time, because that da na 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 is Christmas to me. Like it is what I hang my stockings to. So Carrie, tell us a little bit about your relationship to Home Alone, why it is the ultimate Christmas. Make the case. Why is this the ultimate Christmas movie?
So for me, this just is Christmas. And I should have asked my mom because I don't remember if I saw it in movie theaters. I don't know, but it came out when I was 5. So to me, I was Kevin. Like I could totally relate to him on a personal level of what would I do had my parents left me at home, and what would I do in that situation? And for him to kind of be like the anti-hero, a little bit of that, which obviously spoke to me as a Slytherin, even way back in the day. I always loved villains more than I loved princesses. So for me, I loved him, and I related to him as a character. Not that my parents would have literally ever left me home alone. But for me, I love the hijinks of it all, especially being that age. One of my other favorite movies of all time is Goonies. Mm-hmm. So like kicking it way back.
Goonies never say die.
Nope. So I love a movie with like hijinks and booby traps. It just kind of speaks to me on like a level of what I enjoyed as a kid. So I think I have a real deep nostalgia for this movie. And unlike Love Actually, I do think this movie aged perfectly. Maybe that's just my nostalgia talking. But I think this is a movie you can still watch and you can laugh at it and your kids can enjoy it. So it's good, just family entertainment.
My dad still laughs, and it's one of my favorite things about my dad, because my dad loves a good rom-com, loves good like hijinks movies too. Laughs hysterically, like to the point of tears, with the spider on the face. Like my dad is almost 70, and like still to this, like for 30 years at this point, has been laughing just audibly, just nonstop to that joke. And I think it's beautiful. It does intergenerational comedy really well.
It's a family movie, and I think there's something missing from, I think we've moved away from family movies. There's kids movies, there's adults movies. By the way, I do want to correct myself now before we get any emails about it in the future. It's not John Waters, it's John Hughes.
John Hughes
doing Home Alone would be super fun and much different. And
that's the reboot I want to see. I want to see a John Waters Home Alone with Macaulay Culkin still as Kevin.
Okay, so there is a video clip somewhere of Kevin McAllister as like a hitchhiker, talking about how when he was a kid, he basically tried to murder 2 burglars, and it is dark and it is funny. But yeah, sorry, that was a divergence. It's a family movie. I always think it's funny where Home Alone's one of those movies where now if there was a reboot, one, they wouldn't have made their flight if they left the house 45 minutes beforehand. 2, cell phones
with exist. 6 kids.
Yeah, like cell phones exist. 3, they run up to the gate and the door is shut, and the response would have been, "You shouldn't have flown American." American Airlines, sponsors of 2-on-1. But the whole premise of it: child left to his own devices, mother doing anything to get back to her kid. It's a good movie.
It is. And I also think it's important too for kids, and maybe why it spoke to me as a kid, is it doesn't speak to you as a child that you're stupid, yes, which I think is really important. And a lot of kids movies, especially now, because I have toddlers, so I'm forced to watch a lot of kids stuff, they really dumb it down. And this movie had a lot of adult humor in it. So it had, like we said, something for the parents, but also the kids could think it's funny, and it's not treating them like, that they're silly or stupid or anything. So I think that's also probably why I liked it.
Well, the conversation on the stairs leading up to the attic, when Kevin says, I wish I didn't have a family, and Catherine O'Hara, God, I love Catherine O'Hara. Her
she's
response though is,
the best.
Well, she's like, why would you wish that? Or let's hope your wish doesn't come true. But it's not the least bit condescending. It's not I'm a adult talking to a child. It's, you are someone I love, and you deserve to have just this honest, bared soul. So is Home Alone a Christmas movie, or is it a movie that takes place at Christmas? And I should note, so the working definition, in trying to discover who is pulling the sword from the stone for our Die Hard episode, so to speak, I asked, is Die Hard a Christmas movie, and it blew up my Facebook. And some people were arguing Die Hard is a movie that takes place at Christmas because if you take Christmas away, it still works. And other people were arguing it has to happen at Christmas. Home Alone, is it a children's movie that takes place at Christmas, or is it a Christmas movie for kids or families, as it were?
So 2 things. Number 1, Die Hard is probably my other second favorite Christmas movie. I am definitely team Christmas. It's definitely a Christmas movie to me. And that's another one I have to watch every single year. But that's a really great question. And for me, I think it's a Christmas movie. I think if you took it away and you put it just in a random, another random time of the year, I think it would still work. But I think you're missing the magic piece of it, because to me, I think, and again, we're going to get into it, one of my hot takes, there's definitely some sort of supernatural force at play here.
Okay.
I think that whether it's the magic of Christmas, or if we want to get into the theological part of it, whether it's God working or speaking to Kevin, but to me, this is a Christmas movie, because I think if you take that away, you miss some of the magic of it.
I'm with you. I think it's a Christmas movie because there's something like if they're just on vacation, it's not as much as why like Kevin being alone. It's like you get the heartstrings get pulled when he wakes up Christmas morning and his parents are still not there. And even though he has wished this, his wish has come true, which for kids is such a big part of, you know, the magic of childhood. You make the wishes of what you want and like what you hope your life turns out to be and all the things. But it plays most emphatically when, you know, you realize that it's Christmas. It's the time in which socially, not even just religiously, although, you know, obviously yes, but socially, when families generally come together, chosen, biological, whatever, right? And so like, I'm with you. I think it's a Christmas movie.
Well, and to add to that, sorry, no, they also did, when they did the sequel, which I don't even know if we're going to get into, but
you can come back. We'll do Lost in New York when I'm back in New York.
I also do love that movie as well. But they did it at Christmas time again, because I think it really, like you just said, I think it really plays at people's heartstrings during that season. And again, it sort of adds to the magicalness. So the sequel, they put, you know, it again at Christmas time.
So one of the things that I think is going to be an ongoing question during Christmas in July is, so part of the movie categorization is It's a Wonderful Life is an Easter movie, not a Christmas movie, because it's about death and resurrection, and you can take Christmas right out of it and it doesn't matter. And so I think one of our criterion for Christmas movies is it's set at Christmas, but there has to be a magic to it. Is that fair? Is that an okay working definition for everybody? Like
yeah.
I support it.
I think about when the wet bandits, because they're not the sticky bandits yet, are following Kevin, and I love that they're like, why is he suspicious? As this jankety van is just like one of my favorite lines.
In the heights of like the stranger danger era too.
Yep.
and in like the super rich suburb of Chicago that they live in, but apparently everyone's on vacation. But he goes to the church and he hides by throwing a cloak over himself. But I wonder, he hid as the Virgin Mary. It was blue and he took her spot. So is Kevin initiating the overthrow of the regular dynamic of the world? Is Kevin initiating the upheaval and reversal of the status quo in that moment? Was that Kevin's Magnificat?
Wow.
Or I'm going to call it the Magnifikevin.
Carrie?
I think you're giving Kevin kind of a lot of credit with that. I wasn't going quite so deep into that.
Let me play a little bit more, right? So this is a movie where Kevin grows up. He goes grocery shopping. When he goes to buy a toothbrush, he doesn't know what the ADA is, but he asks if it's approved by it, and he sees, I don't want to talk about Shovel Neighbor. He's my final answer, but we can. But he sees Shovel Neighbor, and he runs off. But he has this moment where he takes on Mary, who incidentally is the God bearer, right? So maybe God moves into Kevin at this point, and then he's able to do laundry and go grocery shopping and like function as a human being who is to take care of himself in a bigger picture. Maybe I'm going nuts. Like, this is Theotokos to the extreme, and I'm sorry.
No, I don't think you're wrong though. I mean, there is something there. There's like the fulcrum of our lives in which we are forced to kind of grow up, right? And this is one of those for Kevin, or it is for Kevin. And I think it is partially for a generation, for all of us. We watched this young kid get left behind and forgotten by his parents, which is a true story for a lot of people, not for all, but like, and for those of us that it isn't our story, we saw that it could happen for the first time, right? It was all what this thing does, and what the Magnificat does, and all that is that it legitimizes some of these spaces, right? It says like these things can happen to you. These things are part of this magic, for lack of a better term, good or bad magic, right? Like this magic is part of that it legitimizes it and says like this is a part of who we are as people. The magic of growing up and being self-sufficient, the magic of being called into spaces that we may not be ready for, is part of why I think, you know, when you named like Christmas movies have to have a little bit of magic in them, right? Like that's part of like what this is. This movie, I think, changed an entire generation of people because it not only humanized and gave power to the younger voices, but it problematized intergenerational relationships and helped heal some of them as well.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note too with this is, you know, Kevin, we were talking about magic here, but he never loses his faith in the magic or the power that he can still wish his family to come back. I mean, that's why he goes to visit Santa and to try to, you know, say, hey, can you give Santa a message for me? So he still retains, even though, yes, he is growing up and he's been left behind and he's forced into those types of situations, but he still retains some of his childlike innocence, which I think is also really important. And again, probably why this movie spoke to me as a kid, because he's acting in adult situations, but is still maintaining, you know, some of that childlike wonder that is so important to being a kid.
Well, I remember the first senior minister I worked for loved Matthew 18, the let the little children come to me. And he would always say, when he preached that scripture far too often, he would say, my first disciples pastor, not Pastor Carol. Hey, Pastor Carol. He would always say that's childlike, not childish. You know, when he rolls out the battle plan, his blueprint, which incidentally, Macaulay Culkin drew.
Really?
Yeah. And Christopher Columbus thought it was so funny that he, like, cute and great, that he was like, yeah, absolutely, we're putting that in the movie. Can we talk? No, not right now. He's not trying to be an adult. He's not rationalizing like an adult. He's not confronting them like an adult. He's going to use cartoon violence. He killed them like 6 times. We do understand this, right? Like he gave them severe head trauma. They are dead. But it's cartoon violence because he's a child and watches cartoons. He's not allowed to watch, what is the fake movie they have? Keep the Change, You Filthy Animal, or Angels of
which I thought was a legit movie until like last year.
Me too. I didn't realize that was fake.
Keep the Change, but also like again, like this movie is so okay. I'm going to change this into a question.
Sorry, that would have driven me crazy. Angels.
No, but so what do we do as people of faith with these kind of statements in the lexicon, right? Keep the change, you filthy animals. Like that's, everyone knows it.
Look there what you did, you little jerk.
Yeah, exactly. Or even the like, right? Like there are just things that are part of who we are socially that this movie has instilled in us. And in the same way that there are spaces, you know, if it's like peace be with you and also with you, right? Like there's those kind of parallels in church and in faith work and in this movie. What do we do as people of faith with those statements that kind of carry us through, but also bring us back to that early childhood stage? Is that maybe what Jesus was talking about? Like, let the little children come to, are in Jesus's call to let the children come to him. Is there also room for the adult child?
Well, I hope so.
I was gonna say, I hope so, because I still, I mean, like I said, I'm 35 and I have children, but I still think of myself as not quite an adult yet, even though I pay bills and I have a mortgage and everything like that, you know. So I hope that there's room for people who still retain childlike wonderment, because that's what I think that I have. You know, I am so lucky and blessed that I get to travel the world and I get to see all different kinds of things. And I think if you lose some of that sense of wonderment, then you become a cynical person. And it's very easy, especially in my line of work, to become very cynical. Sure. Because I see some really horrible, awful stuff. And that's what I'm there to help people recover from disasters and emergencies. So it's very easy to become cynical. And there's lots of people in my business that do, but I still try to retain some of that wonderment and that excitement over things, because otherwise, it would be very difficult to do what I do. So I hope that there's room for people like me, I would say.
So, I mean, I definitely think so. I just, when we talk about, especially that line in scripture, it's generally looked at as like a space for welcoming the children, right? And like very rarely is it the status or the state in which children are to be kind of placed upon all of us to say, like, engage in the wonder. It's the hermeneutic of curiosity that children embody so well, because apparently Ted Lasso is just going to follow us forever. And so, but that curiosity that children kind of innately embody, we as adults often lose. And so when I think of that, Jesus saying, like, let the children come to me, it's a call also to all of us to tap into that childlike wonder, that childlike, yes, kind of what Kevin is doing is a bit more violent than I think what most of us hope, but there's curiosity there's ingenuity, there's creativity into getting out of life's situations. And I think that that's part of what the church needs to do better at cultivating for its adult members, is to say, like, wow, this really is an awful situation that you're in. Let's think about it, like, creatively. Let us help you engage creatively. And I guess the larger question is what do faith institutions need to do to help its participants, for lack of a better word, like, continue to be creative? When do we lose that creativity and how do we regain it? Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's one that I think is prompting us to think. So this is an Advent movie, technically, right? Because it takes place before Christmas. It culminates on Christmas. Sorry, the Presbyterian in me screams every Advent, because I totally understand why people want to sing Christmas songs in December. And I understand that nobody wants to come to church on like the 29th of December, but also, like, there's seasons for a reason and there's reasons for seasons. Advent is about cultivating that sense of wonder. It's the four most predictable sermons of the year. You talk about peace, hope, joy, and love. You might call them something else, but the candle is always pink, unless you're doing Christmas in July, and then there's 3 pinks and 1 purple. I don't know how they burnt out. I surely didn't blow them out earlier. By the way, listen to this lighter. Like, it sounds like anyways, it is. Peace, joy, and love. It's a reminder that we have to cultivate these, because hope is something that we talk about or we talk around. We don't speak to all the time. Peace is this great ideal. It's not something that's already freely offered. Joy, most people define it as happiness, which it's not. Like, it's that building up of, like, can anything happen up to Christmas Eve and then Christmas Day? But we only do it once a year. And we do it in such a way that, like, it's part of Happy Honda Days. It's not necessarily like, because it's the, whoa, Christmas is 12 days. What do you mean? And,
Honda, we're available for sponsorship.
We are. We don't.
Wait, Carrie. No, I like, Arthur, I like that you're talking about seasons, and how, how they kind of inform who we are, how we should act, how we should participate, right? Because, again, going back to part of, like, oh, Kevin's without his family on Christmas, right? Like, it's this season of togetherness and all of that. And Carrie, in your work, as someone that helps, I imagine seasons play, especially like hurricane season or earthquake season, things like that. How do seasons play into how you see communities form?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And you're right with hurricane season. I mean, we're deep into hurricane season already, and it's predicted to actually be just as bad, if not worse, than the one we had last year, which is crazy to think about because we got all the way into pretty deep into the Greek alphabet. So there's, you know, that's kind of a way that a community can form, because we all have to sit around and talk about, you know, what are we going to do preparing for a storm, and how do we prepare for the season in general. So thinking about that kind of a community. And then just in the work I do in general, I mean, it's a very small world, the humanitarian aid space. We all sort of see each other in different emergencies. We know who the big actors are and who works for what organization. So that's kind of another sort of community that can form. And then I think even during an emergency, you can see communities form, because you're there, you're experiencing something together, whether that's as different organizations, you know, responding to an emergency, or even within your own response team. Like I was deployed last November for the hurricanes that hit Honduras, and we kind of formed a little unit, like almost a little family, the four of us who were deployed, because it was Thanksgiving when we were there. So you kind of they kind of have to become your de facto family. And so I think that's kind of a way that, in my experience, we've seen communities form around different seasons. And then of course, Christmas is also very important to us as well, from a giving perspective. People want to, you know, give us donations, which we are very, very thankful for at the end of the year. And so that's kind of another way that we have to think about the Christmas season and the season of giving. And then now that they've created, there's a Giving Tuesday, which is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. So that's kind of when our Christmas season kind of kicks off. Which sorry, I know that's bad for you, but well, Thanksgiving and Christmas are supposed to be separate.
Before we get off of this, and I love that, but I do want to, like, as you do such good and faithful work, and we didn't offer you the time to be like, how are you, Carrie? What's happening in your world? How can people give to your organization? Just a quick plug, so that people know how to give.
In July. Yeah, like,
because it's the Christmas in July, so we're going to start giving early. How do people give? Yeah, how do people give for your organization, Carrie?
Yeah, sure. So I work for Lutheran World Relief, and so you could just go right onto our website, lwr.org, and contribute that way. We have several appeals that are open right now if you want to give to something specific, but we also have a general emergency fund that you can give to. So then I'm able to do my job and respond immediately after an emergency happens. And that sets us up with kind of a revolving fund that we can pretty much instantly access and get on the ground and get to work.
Awesome.
Excellent. lwr.org.
Yes.
Okay. Can we talk about community for a second? Because you started touching on that. I mean, the movie is called Home Alone. The whole idea is that Kevin McAllister is alone. But we can't do things alone. And spoiler for a movie that's nearly as old as we are, that everyone in the world has seen. Kevin is about to get murdered by the wet bandits when he's finally caught. And then Shovel Neighbor, who probably has a name, but no, he doesn't. Shovel Neighbor ends up finally giving the coup de grace to the wet bandits with like a pretty flimsy looking shovel. Like, they've taken paint cans to the head. I don't understand why this worked, but it's only when he's not alone that he's safe. Is that not a theological message? Is that part of the magic?
I think so. Well, I also really like that he takes solace in the church. He takes solace, like that's one of those moments where, even though, you know, he's hiding and he's the Mary, and like, it's not, he doesn't come into a church with, you know, community and everyone's like, what you got? Because in my head also, as I'm rewatching this as a pastor, right? I'm like, oh my gosh,
your family, child.
Where is your child? Where is your family, sir? Why are you home alone? How can I help you? But that he knows, maybe not explicitly, but like internally, that like church is a place in which you can take solace. Church is a place in which you can go to be cared for and loved and safe, and maybe even hide if you need to, right? Maybe you're hiding from yourself, or maybe you're hiding from others, but like church at its best is an open space for you to use as you need. And I think that theologically we see that for Kevin happen as he goes in there. And the old man's name is Old Man Marley.
Old Man Marley, that's
double
really
neighbor.
Yeah, so I actually think that that's a really interesting point, because the church and the church community or space is really the only thing that kind of gives him anything in the movie. Because if you think about it, all of the adults in the secular world fail him. I mean, they, you know, the lady with the toothbrush, she's asking him, trying to figure out the dental, not even thinking like, why are you, this child here, asking about a toothbrush? Like, where's your family? And same thing for the checkout counter lady. Like, she does ask him a little bit, but she doesn't press it very often, very, very much about that. So she, the world around him is totally failing him. And the same thing with the bumbling people at the police department, transferring the mom here and there and all of that kind of stuff. There's a lot of people, more in the secular world who are completely failing Kevin. But the church, is there to offer him support or protection when he needs it the most.
There is a strong anti-authority message in this movie. Don't trust cops. And if you do trust cops, they're not going to help you.
Yeah.
Like, I am honestly surprised that they didn't like Batman the Wet Bandits at the end and like leave them to be discovered by the police.
I feel like this honestly, this is where my protest spirit came from all those years ago. Defund the police, give your money to Lutheran World Services.
And look how broken the justice system is, because the guys are back. They skip parole if they had charges pressed against them, because they're in New York like a year later.
Yep.
Like,
just hanging out. Yeah.
John Hughes. Who knew? Actually, I totally knew. Ferris Bueller's Day Off speaks to all of that.
Absolutely. Well, and so thinking of that, and this is one of the questions that like I wanted to bring, and I think it's important for our time this year, right? Like, or after coming out of last year, not that we've actually even come out of it fully, but as we're coming out, how do we support the trauma-informed life? Because Kevin was left behind by his family and almost murdered, and had to come up with creative ways to stay alive and support himself. And I can only imagine what that does to one's 10-year-old psyche as he grows up. And for a lot of us last year, I think it felt we were home alone. We were the system left us behind, and we were home alone. And so how would, and maybe this is an imaginative question, but like, what should we as faith leaders do in this time to help those that have been home alone for the last year?
Wow. That's like why do you do that every show? You just drop like the gold question. Travis, would you please make up a song for like, this is the gold standard question? I think we have to relearn how to be in community. I think we have to relearn how to trust. In the church, Old Man Marley has to give of himself. He has to cross the room. He has to give up listening to his daughter or granddaughter sing. The whole reason he's there, but he sacrifices self in order to build community. And I think we've forgotten that, because we've been wiping down our groceries and, oh God, I got to wear a mask, or not wear a mask. Please wear a mask if you're a deuce listening to the show. Like, why wouldn't you? Don't be rude.
Get vaccinated.
Yeah, like, stop listening to us if you don't. I don't anyways. Yeah, that's fair. If you're unvaccinated because you're like, my liberty, you need to unsubscribe. But we have to relearn community, because we've all been home alone for so long. We have to trust, and we have to risk, and we have to hope. Which I think is what Kevin McAllister represents. He represents hope, doesn't he?
I think so. And I think you're totally right in that we need to remember what it's like to have community, because we've been so, again, home alone or on, computer screens. That's literally been my world, is Zoom meetings. And I'm so excited to go back to the office, hopefully in September, to go and just see human beings again and have that face-to-face interaction. And so I think that's really important for us to remember, how to just be engaging with people, and I think a lot of people are hopefully excited for that and to restart that community.
Amen.
And to maybe listen to the stories, as I was thinking about this, like the trauma that we need to address is in part, like, no one lived last year in similar ways, right? So like listen to the stories, like, as if we think about this movie as Kevin telling his own story, right? Like that if we listen to all of the spaces in which we had to be creative to survive, that taking those in and not just trivializing them or making fun of them, while these things are very, in the way that, I mean, this movie I think is a beautiful, I think, Carrie, you were really right, and it aged actually pretty well in telling us, like, you can hold, the levity and the trauma in equal measure in some regard, right? It's funny when they get hit in the head with a paint can. It's not funny that these people are trying to murder a kid, right? Like, and yet it is. And so, like, hearing the stories of last year, and I tell them all the time of, like, I bought a VR machine because I could do a Google Play on it, and I could see my parents' house and my friends' houses, and it felt like I was getting out of my own house. That's sad and very funny and ridiculous. And letting those stories inform the way in which we build community that ties us and pulls us back into the space that God calls us to. The church of life is part of, I think, our trauma-informed response for 2021 and beyond.
And if Kevin hadn't listened to Shovel Guy's story, I know Old Man Marley, but Shovel Neighbor, if he hadn't been present to tell the story, do you think Shovel Neighbor would have known to watch for Kevin and to go help him at the neighbor's house when he was about to get really murdered?
Can I push back on your, now I'm just thinking about this right now, but can I push back on your do we want to tie people to their most violent acts?
Oh, I meant shovel as in he's always shoveling the ground. I didn't.
Well, and he is, but also I think when I hear shovel, so here's I think of how he saves Kevin at the very end, right? Doesn't he take the shovel to the dude's head?
You know what? That's fair. I'm gonna call him Old Man Marley. That's a fair.
No, and you can, and I didn't mean that as like a bad thing. It's just like, I think that we often, you had a totally different vision of what that even meant in your head.
But when we think of Home Alone as a whole, and Carrie, tell me this because you're the one who's seen this movie 100 times. What is if you had to show one clip of 5 seconds or less of Home Alone, what is the clip that you would show in order to give the grand convivience of the movie?
Oh gosh, I mean, I think it would have to be probably some scene to me that kind of sums up the movie, or what I have always, why I love this movie, is something, when, like, one of his traps or one of his, booby traps or something like that. That to me kind of sums up the movie. I think that's a good, you kind of get the flavor of what the movie is. It's silly, it's fun, it's family friendly kind of stuff, but it's violent, but so I think that to me is kind of what I would say sums up the movie. But I just want to also go back to what you were talking about too, with this idea of trauma and community and what we were talking about. I also think it's really important about judgment. Because I think we also have to be very careful with judging people for their trauma, and not saying, if somebody wants to wear a mask, that's on them, and they can do that. Or if somebody, hasn't left their house or still wiping down their groceries or something like that. I think it's really important to allow people to experience the trauma that we've, felt since March of 2020 in their own ways and to deal with it, because I think that's important to think about is people deal with trauma in different ways. And so trying not to judge people for either moving too quickly or still holding on to some of those other themes as well. And I think that's important from a theological perspective as well.
That is really fair. And I was being snarky, but I was not being well, loving. So I do take that back. If you haven't unsubscribed from us, folks who are still processing your trauma, please stay on, and I'll do better for you.
Well, and I think I this year, and I think the movie title alone, right, is we could talk hours just on what it means to be home alone, because especially as Arthur and I are more like traditional congregational faith leaders, but Carrie, I don't want to discount the faith leadership that you also bring into these spaces, but like we've had homebound members for years and years and years, and all of a sudden last year we all found ourselves being the homebound members. And homebound members in the churches that I have served and participated in have always been a secondary thought. We go, we maybe give them communion, we check in on them once a month, once a week, and it's a diaconate responsibility sometimes to go and, and all of those things. And it's like, well, now we know that, oh God, it is awful to be homebound. Or it can be. I don't want to say that it is always, but it can be really challenging. So, and I think there was a part like at the beginning of Home Alone where Kevin is trying to be an adult, and like for me, Arthur, your 5-second question, I was like, yeah, it's this. And then when he runs around the house and he's just like, there's freedom there, and there's an understanding that like once you hit a certain level, there is freedom to your life, and yet once you actually hit that level in real life, you realize that it's not the freedom that you thought it was. And so like, as we move into these new spaces of church and faith development and community, to take in the picture of the whole, to say both there are people still growing in these spaces, there are people who are established and working in them, and there are people that are trauma informed and coming into them that we need to address in different ways. Like there is not one size fits all understanding of like how we talk to each other about the life we're building together.
I'm just going to throw this out. My husband took our daughter to Arkansas this weekend because he went out to see family and took her along. And the moment they were gone, I may have run through the house singing "Halle, Halle, Hallelujah" just for a minute. And I did end up missing them. It was only a couple days.
Sure.
I just
and you should. Yes. Brian, you are missed. Brian and Child. Well, Child is missed too. I just don't want to name Child on air. So, yes. But yeah, I mean, but that's that's part of it too, right? Even as we're like, oh, all these churches in, our communities and our work kind of closed down, and there's a little bit where it's like, ooh, it's nice to not have to go to the office and get fully dressed and all of the things. And, we're screaming like, oh my gosh, this is a little bit of coolness. And then like a year later, we're like, oh God, can we just go back to the office, please? And like,
can I keep my sweatpants or my?
Can I keep absolutely?
Well, and we could talk about too, like going back to the office is important in some places, and also like it seems to be enforced because we don't want to make the commercial real estate market collapse. Because everything, and there's accessibility, but I want to honor our time together. But I do want to ask one other thing about John Candy, because I love John Candy.
Oh, R.I.P.
And Macaulay Culkin was cast in Home Alone because of his interactions with John Candy and Uncle Buck. And Catherine O'Hara and John Candy were together in the Toronto improv circuit. That's how they kind of met and knew each other. So like, what does it mean to put yourself at such care in the hand of strangers? Like, did you notice that it wasn't until Catherine O'Hara surrendered that she actually found the help she needed? I'm sorry, like the mother, I forget her name, but like she's trying to bargain. She's trying to sell everything she has. I love when she says, I will literally sell everything to get home to my son. But it's until she's hopeless that she finds transit. It just happens to be in a polka bus. I don't know. There was a question, but I forgot it, and I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I think you asked it, right? Like, what does it?
Surrender in the faith?
Yeah. I don't know. I think that surrender is part of what it means to be in community, right? Like you have to surrender at least in part, that you either can't do it alone, that you're not supposed to do it alone, or that you don't want to do it alone. Those are all valid reasons to like surrender, but that community requires a certain part of surrendering because it ties you to someone else, which means that there is at least some space in which your own thoughts and actions and desires become secondary.
Yeah, I totally agree. You just took exactly what I was thinking, basically. And I think you can't, I think that's a part of being within a community. Otherwise, you know, you don't know everything, or you can't know everything, or you can't provide everything you need. So it's really important to reach out to other people and to surrender and say, hey, I don't know this, or I don't understand this. Can you help me? Or I need help with X, Y, Z. So I think that's an important part of being in what actually kind of defines community to me, you know, is asking and reaching out for help when you need it. Because otherwise, if you don't do that and you don't, you know, ask, you know, work with others that way, then you're just alone.
And Kevin does that, right? Like Kevin models that we need to ask for help because he doesn't ask for help. Had he gone to the neighbor and said, my parents left me behind, can you help me get to them? Like, this isn't the movie, right? And so I think, Carrie, you're you know, just spot on in that, like, you gotta ask for it, right? Part of it is that you gotta tie yourself to someone else in these spaces. And Kevin is a child. He doesn't think that way. And that's why intergenerational work also, and why family movies can be so important, because it tells us that intergenerational work is such holy and needed work, because it ties us into different spaces.
Yeah, something I'm challenging my congregation with in a couple, Sunday, because today is the 14th of July, is we're going to be talking.
It's a beautiful day.
What it means for everyone to be somebody who volunteers with children's ministry, even if it's once or twice a week. I do want to respect our time. And Carrie, thank you so much for coming on today and talking.
Thank you.
The most violent Christmas movie outside of Die Hard.
Is it? Outside of Die Hard, maybe?
Yeah. I mean, and now I need to watch Home Alone 2, because like, is it worse?
I think it's more violent. Yeah. I think.
I remember like somebody
he gets electrocuted. Like I know, like he gets electrocuted so badly, like you see his like skeleton.
You can
like
see his skeleton. It's terrible.
It always scared me as a kid.
He also has to talk to Donald Trump. That seems really violent to me too.
Wow. Okay, we did it.
We did it. Full circle.
We do have a final question that we ask all of our guests. You're familiar with it, of course, and you know that Spiff asks it far better than I ever could.
Carrie, again, thank you so much. We do hope you will come back. We've realized that this show is, we have you know, some guests that just come back often, and we are grateful that you are one of them. So let's do Home Alone. Lost in
Come back. Yeah.
Listen, Arthur, maybe when it's all safe and everything, Arthur, when you come to visit me, we will all be in the same little area.
Let's do it.
Let's
all come together. Anyways. Yes. But Carrie, thank you again. What biblical story, book, theme, character, or beyond are you most reminded of in Home Alone?
So here is my super hot take that I'm coming with. And I don't know if this is necessarily my theory, but I was doing some digging around, and I think this really is a story of redemption. And, you know, Kevin goes into the church and he almost confesses his sins to Old Man Marley, because he asked him, have you been a good boy? And Kevin says, no, I have not been. And he sort of, that's kind of how he reverses his wish and what we're talking about with the magic is. And so he is then almost redeemed at the end of the movie when his family comes back. And so this is another question I would posit to you guys too, would be, is Old Man Marley God?
So my answer was Old Man Marley was the Holy Spirit, because there's a sanctifying part. There's the demand for honesty. There's this omnipresence.
he is kind of omnipresent, and even if you look, like, why does he have the cut on his hand, both sides?
Oh, he has stigmata.
Yep.
Oh.
Because even like when he's at the counter, he puts his hand down and there's a very deliberate shot of his hand that's bleeding on both sides. He talks about his son and being and how he needs his son to come back to him and all of that kind of stuff. So that's my hot take.
Okay.
I want to go. That's so good.
I'm gonna say that is yours, and yours is so much better than my, like, it's the Holy Spirit. But I'm gonna point this out. John Candy and the Polka Group is the church doing what the church should do, which is finding people who have surrendered and saying, we can try to get you where you're going, and we'll go with you as far as we can.
Oh, that's so good too. Mine is way more funny and not. Mine's not as deep and great.
No, I'm sorry. Is Old Man Marley God?
It's so good, Carrie. Oh my God. Yes. That is such a good hot take.
Wait a second.
That's why you have me on here, right? For my hot take.
No, I want you to come back for Home Alone 2, because I think Bird Lady, I've always joked that she's just Old Man Marley in drag.
Of course.
But Bird Lady would therefore be the Holy Spirit, right?
Yeah. Okay. And she's got the doves. That's why she hands him the dove.
Yep.
Yep.
Holy.
I'm sorry.
Holy smokes. All right. Well, my last final question answer is nowhere near as good as any of this. But I said that the Wet Bandits are the Matthew 24 Thief in the Night bandits. The one where you do. It's also a Revelation quote, but it comes up a couple times in scripture. But you do not know. But know this, if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into.
But Kevin, like, did they schedule it with him? Because he was like, oh man, it's 9, I gotta go. And like, he sets up and he's sitting there and like the clock chimes and the burglars show up. It's like they had
he overhears them.
Yeah. That's why I went with the Matthew 24 text, because it talks about the actual time and not letting them in, because like he has that time and understands like what the preparation that needs to go into it. So,
if somebody would have told me a year and a half ago that I would enjoy having a Zoom call about the theology of Home Alone, I think I would have thought they were lying. But here we are today.
Listen, 2-on-1 has changed our lives in so many really fun ways.
Carrie, thank you so very much for being.
Thank you, guys.
Oh my gosh.
We're showing right now a promo from Jeff Wunrow, our sponsor. Check out jeffwunrow.com. Also, though, after the show, head over to lwr.org. That stands for Lutheran World Relief, and give them all your money.
Please.
Yeah. Oh, you know what?
You also dropped a Cash App 2-on-1,
Hey, that 15% you save on Jeff Wunrow Stoles, take that, give that to LWR, but do that first. Anyways, this has been 2-on-1. Christmas in July continues next week. We're talking with Quadri Harris. He's coming back to walk us through the Best Man holiday. Laura, Blackwood Pickerel is coming in to finish out our month with Die Hard. You'll want to check that one out, Carrie. And then August has stuff happening too, but I'm just going to enjoy the reason for the season, which is Christmas. Thank you for festively showing up today, Carrie, and for being one of our favorite guests of all time.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're so grateful. All right, deuces, we're out.
Deuces, goodbye.